Hello, and welcome to the 8th episode of H.O.P.E's Beethoven Sonata series. This series is in honor of Beethoven's 250th birthday this year, and we've taken this opportunity to showcase some spectacular interpretations of a selection of his sonatas, along with educational bits of information scattered throughout each video. Today we will be discussing one of his best-known sonatas, Opus 13, also known as Pathetique. This sonata was an important turning point in Beethoven's compositional career, establishing him not only as a very profound pianist, but also a very sophisticated composer. The piece became a legendary hit almost overnight, and over 200 years later, the tune still remains as one of the most recognizable motifs in classical music. Without further ado, let's jump into the interviews for the first movement.
So my name's Ryan Wang. I'm 14 years old and from the San Francisco Bay Area. So I started learning piano when I was 5 years old, so that's about 9 years, and I'm studying with Professor Hans Bokel.
So I'm Aaron Yu. I'm a rising junior from the Bay Area. I've been learning piano since I was 5, so about 11 years now, and I study with Dr. Jed Galan. Some things I like to do outside of music are I'm interested in science, especially chemistry and biology.
Do you guys have any repertoire right now that's what you would consider fun to play, or anything that particularly interests you that you're currently playing?
I just started learning Carl Wein's Sonata No. 1. It's kind of a different piece from what I'm used to. It has all of these weird rhythms, and it's kind of hard to read the notes, I guess, compared to other pieces. So, yeah, and I'm also learning a Bach Prelude and Fugue.
So I've been having a recent obsession with playing too much of the Leado Sonata, the third movement especially. It's really tiring, but for some reason I find it really fun. So that's been kind of taking up most of my practice time. And I guess I'm doing some other rep too for next year, as prelude fugues, another romantic piece, and contemporary pieces as well.
Let's talk about your favorite eras and composers.
I would say Chopin or Liszt.
I love Chopin as well, so we can be friends.
Yay.
All right, Aaron?
Well, I really like the classical era of music because I think, for me personally, I like how it's very simple and clean, and how you don't really need a lot of extra embellishment or things like that to kind of make it beautiful. And I mean, I guess I play a lot of Chopin because I'm pretty sure everyone plays Chopin at one point in their lives.
So, do you want to share anything about the history or the compositional background of this piece, or maybe your movement? Is there anything particularly interesting that Beethoven does that's either quirky or weird or uncommon for the time?
This sonata is one of Beethoven's earlier sonatas, so it's more on the classical side, but it has a lot of emotion compared to other classical sonatas. It has these really powerful sudden dynamics that make it really kind of like Beethoven. And I guess it could be considered really passionate for a classical sonata, and that's kind of the name means. Yeah.
Yeah, Beethoven was known for this was basically the sonata that kind of set up his style for the rest of his years, because it really started to bring out his I wouldn't say his emotional side, but it is his emotional side, and it's sometimes you can hear he's going crazy. He's starting to go crazy. So yeah, this was really one of the bridge moments in Beethoven's life.
Yeah, I think because Beethoven composed this, I think when he was going deaf, if I'm not wrong. So it's a really kind of an internal struggle, and it's different from a lot of his earlier sonatas. I feel it's a lot more romantic in a sense. Even if you just compare the sonata before it, that's it's already a really big difference. And one of the really interesting things I think about this one is when there's the second theme, he actually goes to E flat minor instead of E flat major, because the piece is in C minor, so you would expect it to go to the relative major, but he goes to like the relative minor. So I think that was really interesting when I first played it because it sounded really weird to me, but in a sense it was also really cool.
Yeah, if you actually, there's like a bunch of rules in classical music and like music theory. And if you actually like go through every single one of Beethoven's sonatas, he breaks one of these rules intentionally in every single sonata. And it's like if I did that, that would be like completely sacrilegious and completely terrible, right? Because I suck.
Yeah.
But Beethoven, every single time he does it, it's like reasonable and it like has a deeper meaning that you can like dissect and take apart, and it's super cool. What are some of the like the technical or musical challenges within your particular movement?
In terms of dynamics, because it has to have these sudden dynamics, like sudden fortes. It's kind of hard to control, because a lot of the pieces like so fast and powerful. It's kind of hard to keep it quiet sometimes. And I guess another part of it is the speed aspect of the piece that makes it challenging.
So for me, so like Ryan said, there's a lot of like sudden dynamics or like contrast. So and Beethoven was like an orchestral composer. So like a lot of teachers told me that I had to kind of like think about what instrument was playing each part. So that was kind of really interesting and fun, but also like challenging at the same time for me. And this was like actually my first like real Beethoven sonata. So it was kind of like my piece as of like adjusting to like Beethoven and like his type of music, because like before I was playing like Mozart and stuff, and like Beethoven's obviously really different. Mainly like emotion or like musicality wise, the beginning was really difficult because you have to have like a good sense of rhythm without, and like you have to make it expressive as well, but you couldn't like sacrifice the rhythm, because a lot of times I would like overdot or like underdot, because the beginning is like the dotted rhythm stuff. So I like spent like 30%, 50% of like every single class like doing the opening with my teacher.
Yeah, actually, Beethoven does this a lot in openings. If you listen to Opus 31-3, he also opens with dotted rhythms, and like it's so hard to get right. It's just, I don't know. It's always like you're like super late or you're super early, but it's never just right, and your teacher's always like super picky about it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it gets on our nerves a little bit. What are some key similarities or differences between this sonata and any other Beethoven or classical sonatas that you've played before?
Beethoven and Mozart were like really different composers in a sense of their style. And when I first played this piece, that was like coming from like Mozart phase. So it was a drastic change, and I had to really, I guess, change how I played the sound and my touch in a sense. Like not to like a point, like crazy point, but Beethoven's like sound kind of required more like, I guess, strength in like the upper body in a sense, and like so I had to really learn how to like create the kind of warm sound that Beethoven kind of has. So I played like the Tempest Sonata, and well, I'm working on the Leia Sonata now, but I think the Pathetique is similar to both of these pieces in a sense. Like the Tempest is also kind of stormy in a sense, like this one. And for the Leia Sonata, I feel like the personal message behind it is kind of similar, because here he's kind of like, in a sense, kind of saying goodbye to his hearing, while in the Leia Sonata, it's like goodbye to his patron. So I kind of feel like it's a little bit similar, but like not exactly. Obviously, there's like it's in a different key and all of that, but yeah.
Well, like Aaron said, it takes a lot of strength to play this piece. It's like similar to other Beethoven sonatas, and like for other similarities, maybe like this contrasts in the sudden dynamics.
Do you have like any scenes, imageries, or emotions that you think about or like you imagine when you're performing this sonata?
It's a pretty dark piece. It would be like on the more tragic side?
When I listen to it, I think it's kind of like an emotion of grief in a sense, because it's kind of saying goodbye to his hearing. So I think that was kind of where I got the grief part from. And in the very beginning, like the opening introduction part, I remember my teacher told me it was kind of like Beethoven not accepting that he's going like deaf. And then he's kind of like pleading to like a higher power person, and he's like kind of begging for his hearing, but then the other side's like, no, you're going deaf, kind of like. So it was kind of like, so it was like that kind of helped me with like making the contrast between like the kind of more softer part than to like the more aggressive, I guess, dark parts.
That basically wraps up the interview. Is there any closing thoughts or things that you'd like listeners to listen to during your recording, or anything else you would like to say?
I just hope they enjoy listening to it.
So hello everyone. If we could go around and just introduce yourself.
So I'm Lauren. I'm currently a rising sophomore at Harvard College, studying chemistry and biomedical engineering. My hometown is Chicago, and I've been playing the piano for about 15 years. And my current teacher is Elaine Felder at the Music Institute of Chicago.
Hi everyone, I'm Neo Guerrero. I'm also a rising sophomore at Harvard College, studying electrical engineering and computer science. I'm originally from San Francisco, and I've been playing piano for 11 years now. And my main teacher is Professor John McCarthy at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music.
Let's just move on to our piano interests. Do you have any current repertoire that you would consider interesting or fun, or just overall something that you like to play?
Well, I consider myself more of a duo pianist than a solo pianist. I've been more involved with four hands repertoire as well as two piano repertoire for a long time, especially throughout high school. And I've played a bit of duo repertoire, but some of my favorites are Ravel's Feria, arranged for four hands. It's taken from the Rhapsody Espagnole. And I'm also a big fan of Mozart two piano sonatas.
Yeah, I've personally never really played four hands repertoire, so I might come back to you if I ever need some recommendations for that.
For sure. I think it's a really underappreciated realm of music, so you should try it out. Super fun.
Nice. I've been playing a lot of Beethoven piano sonatas. I like his earlier ones.
Is there any pieces that everyone, including non-musicians, should know about?
I would say most people should be familiar with the Bach cello suites.
Yeah.
I'm sure they already are, or at least they recognize the prelude from the first suite.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think they should really get to know all six of them.
Oh, how long have you been playing cello? I also play cello, probably not nearly as well as you, but
No, I'm not a real cellist. I'm a violist, but I took up the cello last year for fun.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just saw the cello case. I think.
Yeah, I've been trying to hide it with my head because
Yeah.
I don't have any other place to put it in my room.
Yeah, I love cello. It's such a great tone.
I think a variety of Beethoven sonatas actually are kind of important timestamp wise. I like to think about I kind of think about Beethoven sonatas as a timeline myself. It's almost like a timeline of Beethoven's life if you listen to all of them, especially in order. You can kind of see how he progresses from the early stages of his life into his mid and then towards when he passes away. But also I think it's an important time in history because of how it almost bridges the classical and romantic eras of music. And I think it's important for people to at least know the Beethoven sonatas that have names, especially this Pathetique as well as the Moonlight.
Okay, let's move on to the actual piece itself. Do you want to share anything about the history or compositional background of this piece?
I think this second movement in particular reminds me of a certain Mozart piano sonata, as well as I think something by Bach. I'm not entirely sure, but whenever I play it, the modulations as well as the key in C minor kind of remind me of other things in the classical period, but at the same time, I think he takes on more of a rondo aspect, more so than a specific sonata style. I haven't really looked into the history of the piece itself, but the way that he structures it with the cantabile first and then a modulation, and then the cantabile comes back and then there's another modulation and then there's the ending. I think more than a sonata style, it seems more like a rondo style to me.
Yep.
I guess just adding on to what Lauren said, this is one of his, I guess you would say middle period works. I think he wrote it when he was in his 20s, so that'd be right around 1800.
Yeah.
So it's it's sort of in the middle between that purely classical stuff we see from his earlier compositions and his more romantic stuff. And especially the second movement really shows that, because it is really romantic and song-like. But also it's still in a more structured form, like in a classical sonata.
So, what are some technical and musical challenges within this particular movement?
I can start with this movement itself. I think for me, it's hard to find the right tone almost, or like the right character, because I think for me, like, you know what you want to express, but it's sometimes not as easy to actually express it like within the music, to have it like carry forth into the audience. And like voicing wise, of course, that's a struggle, especially with all like second movements that are typical of the classical era. And like they might seem easier, but in reality, like these slower and like more emotional pieces are actually harder to convey like in the way that you want to. So I think for me, it's more finding the right character and finding which like phrases to emphasize and which are more like in the background.
Yeah, as Lauren said, with a lot of second movements in classical sonatas, the voicing is very difficult, especially since he makes the right hand play not only the voice but also some of the harmonies.
What are some differences or similarities between this sonata and any other Beethoven or classical sonatas you've played?
I think going back to the notion of like playing pieces that are very well known, I think I usually like actually try to avoid playing pieces that are very well known, because I feel like it's very hard sometimes to have like that unique interpretation and to like avoid making it sound repetitive or like generic almost. But I think sometimes it's nice to play these as well, because they feel like almost like milestones in your career as a pianist. Like I almost like judge how far I've come based on like which like milestone pieces I've played. Like the Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto 2 means like I've made it far, or like Fear Released in the beginning is like also a milestone piece. And I think like going back to your question, in general, I think playing this piece is different because I think harder about these famous pieces before I like even go to the piano to play it. Like I survey it to like kind of get a sense of how I want it to sound and how I want to feel and what feeling I want to convey. So I think it's kind of a challenge in that way for me.
In a lot of pieces, like a lot of teachers will tell you to like build your own story and like to think about like your own image whenever you're playing the piece. Do you have like any images or scenes that you associate with this movement?
I think of like a lake, kind of like, I don't know if I think of like daylight or moonlight actually, but I think of like a reflection on a lake, because it's adagio cantabile, and that's like the mood that you have to convey, the mood that you want to like it has to be calm, but also like it has to be singing at the same time. And I think what I think of is like a very still forest, and like there's like a lake with the mountain overhead, and then like you can see a reflection inside of it.
That's interesting that you say you thought about a lake, because I also thought about it might not have been a lake, but at least some body of water. But I'm thinking more like there's a boat on the water, and it's just like rocking back and forth really slowly, and that's what the second movement makes me think of. And then later in the development of the second movement, there's a bit more turbulence, and that's like the waves starting to get a bit bigger, but at the end it it subsides. So
I think it's interesting that we both thought of water as well. I think it has to do with like almost the unpredictability of like, I think the development is like very unpredictable almost. Like when I play it, at least like the first time I think I heard Pathetique, the second movement, it was interesting because it wasn't the kind of like development or modulation or changing character that I was expecting. And I think you can also expect that from like bodies of water, like Turbulence, as you mentioned. I think that's an interesting point.
So a little bit of H.O.P.E history. So the second movement of the sonata was actually used as the piece for the first ever H.O.P.E video. And I was just going to ask, like, where do you think this movement fits in modern music culture? And is there something about this movement that you like find particularly soothing, or just something that you'd like to listen to in quarantine? Is there something just that clicks for this piece?
I think, as I said before, like it encompasses various moods as well as like kind of tells a story and has like a clear cut beginning, middle, and end. So I think that's always interesting to listen for. I think it's also interesting, like you mentioned, modern era. this isn't like super modern or like how it fits into contemporary music, but there's this episode of Charlie Brown that I think of where I forget which character plays it, but this piece actually is played. It's featured in an episode of Charlie Brown, and I think it's interesting that like you wouldn't expect a Beethoven sonata to appear in a Charlie Brown episode, but it does. And I think whenever I hear like classical music featured in certain like TV shows or things for children, I get really excited because it's great.
Yeah, I guess about the modern music aspect of this, like, if I'm not mistaken, I think the theme of the second movement is still used in like, or was used in like other compositions. Well, I guess like songs from like pop stars back then. And also, I think I read something about the second movement being like the melody for some, was it a radio commercial or radio show or something? Yeah. So I think that's interesting that they chose the second movement. And yeah, I guess like in this time right now, the second movement is very relaxing. And even though there's some turbulence in it, it ends up fine. So I don't know, that might represent our times now. And we're in that turbulence. And I mean, if we follow the second movement, hopefully we'll be out of that soon.
We can pray. Okay, any closing thoughts or things that you'd like listeners to listen to during your recordings?
I guess like I always say this, but like when listening to recording, I think it's interesting how everyone comes up with their own story to match it, even though like the whole like story aspect of music is actually very intriguing. Because like even for me, every time I play it over and over again or listen to it over again, like I add like certain things to my story. So the story's never complete. So I'd say listen for your own.
Yeah, same here. Just like make your own interpretation of it. And I guess just enjoy it. Like it's a nice, relaxing piece. So.
So my name is Mandy. I'm from California and I'm going to ninth grade this fall. Yeah. I've been learning piano for 6 years. I started learning with Mrs. Dorothy Sue and now I'm learning with Dr. Gowan. I like hiking, reading, writing stories, definitely, and playing ping pong.
Okay, I can do 2 of those. So, yeah, recently during quarantine, I've started hiking once in a while because it's super low contact and there's like not a lot of people around, so it's pretty safe. And it's actually very calming, and it takes your mind off of some of the things that are going on right now.
That's true.
I also play ping pong with my brother, and he always beats me, so no comment. All right, let's talk a little bit about your piano interests. Do you have any like current repertoire that you're playing that you would consider like fun or interesting?
I really enjoyed playing the bark roll from Tchaikovsky, the June one.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Cat and Mouse, that one.
Copeland?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's a very famous piece. He actually wrote it when he was very young, so just about, yeah, I think he was just a very young boy when he wrote it, so it was, and it shows because of like this like little personality.
The playfulness.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's a great piece too. It's always up and down. It's super energetic.
Yes.
I like that piece. I played it as well. Do you have any favorite eras or favorite composers?
Romantic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite composer from that era?
Chopin, like one of the more famous ones.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of Chopin today. So.
Yeah.
My favorite composer as well is Chopin. So he's a lot of his pieces they're not only super virtuosic, like your fingers need to actually work, which mine don't. So, but it's also like a lot of mental stuff. So it's always super fun to play his pieces because it's like the best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah.
Are there any pieces in classical, of classical music that everyone, like including non-musicians, should know about? So this can be like famous or just like underappreciated pieces of music.
Mozart. I think it was 283.
And is there anything like specific about that makes it so that everyone should listen to it?
It's really airy and it sounds really nice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I should take a listen to that because I forgot exactly which one that was because he has so many of them, so it's impossible to like listen to them all.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about this movement itself and the piece as a whole. Do you want to share anything about like the history of this piece, or is there anything like interesting that Beethoven does that's like uncommon or strange that you noticed?
Well, he wrote this piece when he was really mad because, death. So it's really strong.
Yeah.
Moody.
Yeah, so we were actually discussing in like the first and second movement interviews that he was going deaf when he wrote this piece. So like he actually goes through all the stages of grief in like an entire piece, right?
Yeah.
So like the first movement is like anger, and like the second movement is just like regret, and then finally the third movement is just like he's upset, and but like he's like starting to move on, right? So like it's really a grieving sonata, and it's so interesting to see how he weaves it together. What are some like technical or musical challenges within this particular movement?
Okay, for this movement, I would say the dynamics to make it, more defined, and to make the dynamics like even throughout the whole piece, and the entire 3 movements technique.
Yeah. Just in general, because there's so many like things that need to be just perfect, right? Because
Yeah.
it's classical, you can't mess up. So,
Yes.
have you noticed like any similarities or differences between this sonata and any other Beethoven or classical sonatas that you've played?
And differences in Beethoven sonatas to other classical ones are like he's temperamental and moody, you know.
Yeah, he goes through a lot of mood swings throughout his time.
Yeah.
And this was, yeah, as we've said, he's starting to go deaf, so he's starting to go a little bit like haywire up here. So you can really
Yeah.
hear it, especially in the first and third movements. So
Yeah.
So a lot of piano teachers and great professors have said like when you play a piece to visualize something in your head.
I sometimes imagine a blazing fire, like it would burn furiously and then it calms down after a while and then it starts burning again.
Okay, is there any like closing thoughts or things that you'd like the listeners to listen for when you're playing?
I think the changing rhythms are interesting.
And any closing thoughts?
This piece is really nice. I like it.